Do you ever wonder why you keep repeating the same story in your life? Why you attract the same kind of people, fight the same battles, or chase the same dreams, even when you try to change? Carl Jung had an answer. He believed these patterns aren't random. They're archetypes, timeless characters living inside the human psyche, shaping our thoughts, emotions, and choices in ways we rarely notice. This video is every Jungian archetype explained. Not just the theory, but what it means for you. How these ancient forces play out in your relationships, your career, your creativity, and even your struggles. By the end, you'll not only understand the archetypes, you'll recognize them at work in your own story. Jung once said, "Archetypes are the living system of reactions and aptitudes that determine the individual's life in invisible ways." In other words, archetypes are the deep templates of human behavior. They're not invented, they're inherited. They're the shared psychic DNA that shows up in myths, fairy tales, religions, and in your daily life. Think of them as recurring roles in the theater of existence. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the sage. No matter where you look, from ancient Greek myths to modern Hollywood films, you'll find these same characters. And that's because they're not just in stories, they're in us. You might feel like you're choosing freely, but much of the time you're enacting a script older than you are. When you sacrifice your comfort to protect someone you love, you embody the caregiver. When you chase a vision against all odds, you step into the hero. When you sabotage your own success out of fear, the shadow is moving through you. This is where Jung's most radical idea comes in, the collective unconscious. He argued that beneath your personal unconscious, your memories, fears, and experiences, there's a deeper layer shared by all humans. That's where the archetypes live. You didn't learn the concept of the hero. You inherited it. You didn't have to be taught what a mother is. The image, the feeling, the expectation was already etched into your psyche long before you could speak. That's the collective unconscious at work. And here's the catch. Archetypes don't just sit quietly in your mind. They push, they shape, they demand to be lived out. If you ignore them, they show up in dreams, in projections onto other people, or in sudden impulses you can't explain. This is why so many people feel divided within themselves, because archetypes aren't neat, they compete. Part of you longs for safety and belonging, the innocent. Another part craves freedom and rebellion, the outlaw. Another demands mastery and victory, the hero. If you don't recognize these archetypal forces, life feels like constant contradiction. One day you're nurturing, the next day you're destructive. One moment you crave stability, the next you're restless for change. And you wonder, what's wrong with me? But nothing is wrong with you. You're simply housing the same cast of characters humanity has carried for thousands of years. The problem isn't that you have many voices within you. The problem is you don't know who's speaking and why. Here's the good news. Once you see archetypes, you can work with them instead of being ruled by them. You begin to spot when your shadow is hijacking your relationships. You notice when your inner caregiver is running you into burnout. You recognize when your inner trickster is about to make you self-sabotage. And more importantly, you begin to realize you're not just a pawn of these forces. You are the self, the unifying center Jung called the ultimate archetype, the one capable of integrating all the others. That's what we're going to explore in this video. The cast of archetypes shaping your life, what they want from you, and how to integrate them so you can stop living unconsciously and start living mythically. Because when you understand the archetypes, you don't just understand psychology, you understand yourself, your story, and the invisible script you've been living all along. We all wear masks, not the physical kind, but the invisible faces we put on to move through the world. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the version of yourself shaped by expectations, culture, and survival. Think about it. You have a work self, a family self, a social self, each one polished to fit the environment, to be acceptable, to belong. And while this is necessary, none of us could function without some kind of persona. The danger comes when you confuse the mask with who you truly are. From childhood, we learn quickly what earns love, safety, and approval, and what brings shame, rejection, or punishment. Maybe you were praised for being responsible, so you strengthened that mask. Maybe you were scolded for being too sensitive, so you hid that side of yourself. Bit by bit, you sculpted your persona. The persona isn't fake, it's a real adaptation, but it's incomplete. It's the curated self, not the whole self. And every time you trim off a piece of who you are to fit in, that piece doesn't vanish. It retreats into what Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply the part of you that has been denied expression. Your anger, your vulnerability, your desires, your creativity. Anything you learned was unacceptable, got locked away in the basement of your psyche. But here's the twist. The shadow doesn't stay quiet. It leaks out. It shows up in sudden bursts of emotion you can't explain. It projects onto others, making you despise in them what you can't face in yourself. It whispers through dreams, nightmares, even slips of the tongue. That's why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The more we polish the mask, the stronger the shadow becomes. The mask says, be polite, agreeable, professional, while the shadow seethes with resentment. The mask says, be strong, never cry, while the shadow aches to finally be vulnerable. Over time, you start to feel split, fragmented, because you are. One part clings to the mask, the other claws for freedom. And without awareness, this inner war drains you, distorts you, and leaves you wondering why peace always feels out of reach. But the paradox is this: the shadow doesn't only contain what we fear, it holds the very gifts we need. Anger carries the seed of assertiveness. Fear hides the wisdom of caution. Even jealousy can reveal what our hearts long for most. This is why Jung saw individuation, becoming whole, not as destroying the shadow, but as embracing it. Only when we can look at our mask with clear eyes and welcome the shadow without shame, do we begin to glimpse who we really are. We've seen how the unconscious speaks in symbols and how masks and shadows shape our lives. But now we step into the real architecture of the psyche, the archetypes themselves. Carl Jung believed that beneath every personality lies a set of universal patterns, primal images etched into the very fabric of the human mind. He called them archetypes. They are not just ideas. They are living forces, patterns of energy that show up in myths, in religions, in films, and in your own daily struggles. They are the invisible characters of the inner stage, shaping your decisions, your relationships, and even your destiny. So let's meet them. The first is the shadow. It is the part of you that you try to bury. The feelings you judge, the desires you repress, the impulses you disown. But Jung warned that what we repress does not disappear. It grows teeth. It waits in the dark, showing up in projections, in jealousy, in the people you hate for reasons you can't explain. The shadow isn't evil. It is simply the unlived life within you. To deny it is to live half a life. To integrate it is to recover your lost wholeness. Then there is the persona, the mask, the role you wear to survive in society. At work, you wear one face. With family, another. Online, another still. It is necessary. Without the persona, we would be raw and exposed. But when you confuse the mask with your true self, you forget who you are beneath the performance. Many people die as their persona, never realizing their deeper nature. Next comes the Anima and the Animus. These are the inner figures of the opposite gender that live within us. For men, the Anima embodies the feminine, sensitivity, feeling, intuition. For women, the Animus carries the masculine, reason, will, structure. Jung insisted that wholeness requires us to embrace these inner figures, not repress them. When ignored, they can distort relationships, making us chase in others what we deny in ourselves. But when integrated, they expand our capacity for love, creativity, and balance. At the center of it all lies the self, not the ego, not the little I that wakes up every morning and thinks it's in control. The self is the totality of the psyche, the organizing principle of both conscious and unconscious life. It is the archetype of wholeness, the source of meaning, the blueprint for who you were born to become. Jung said that the journey of life, at its deepest, is the journey toward the self. This is what he called individuation, the process of becoming whole. But these aren't the only archetypes. Jung saw countless variations. Later thinkers and storytellers expanded them into 12 recognizable archetypal figures that echo across myths and modern culture alike. The innocent, who longs for safety and simplicity. The caregiver, who nurtures and protects. The hero, who seeks to prove their worth through courage. The outlaw, who breaks rules to bring change. The explorer, who craves freedom and discovery. The creator, who builds and imagines. The ruler, who seeks control and order. The magician, who transforms reality through vision. The sage, who pursues truth and wisdom. The jester, who brings laughter and lightness. The lover, who yearns for connection and intimacy. The everyman, who seeks belonging and authenticity. You'll notice something striking. These archetypes are everywhere. They drive your favorite films, your favorite books, even your favorite myths. Luke Skywalker is the hero. Yoda is the sage. Darth Vader is the shadow. Every culture tells these stories because these stories are already living inside you. But here's the truth most people miss. These archetypes are not just entertainment. They're not just storytelling tropes. They are patterns of psychic energy that live in you right now. And whichever archetype dominates you will shape the way you see the world, and the way the world sees you. The danger, Jung warned, is when you become possessed by an archetype. When you don't realize you're acting out the hero, or the victim, or the caregiver, and the archetype starts to live you instead of you living it. Then you lose freedom. You stop being a person. You become a role. And the only way out is awareness. That's why meeting these archetypes isn't just about learning psychology. It's about reclaiming your own myth. Because whether you realize it or not, you are already living in a story. The question is it yours? Or is it the unconscious story of an archetype using you as its stage? Archetypes are not just ancient symbols in dusty myths. They are alive, shaping the way people love, fight, dream, and suffer. To really understand them, we need to see them in action. Think of the hero. You don't need to look at Greek mythology to find them. You see the hero in the entrepreneur who risks everything for a vision, in the activist who stands in front of tanks, in the soldier who runs toward danger instead of away from it. The hero gives us courage, yes, but also the temptation of pride. The danger is that you can get addicted to the battle, defining yourself only by struggle, unable to rest unless you're fighting another war. Or the caregiver. At its best, this archetype embodies compassion and sacrifice. The parent who stays up all night for their sick child, the nurse who keeps going long after exhaustion. But in shadow form, the caregiver becomes the martyr, someone who neglects their own needs, resents others, and secretly uses their giving as a form of control. The same energy that heals can also enslave. The explorer shows up in those who cannot sit still. The traveler, the wanderer, the innovator who refuses the beaten path. This archetype fuels discovery and progress, but it can also create rootlessness, the person who leaves every relationship, every job, every home, because staying feels like death. Freedom becomes a he when it means never belonging anywhere. The magician is alive in healers, therapists, inventors, even filmmakers. They transform reality, revealing what others cannot see. But the shadow magician manipulates, deceives, uses knowledge as power over others. Every cult leader is a twisted magician. Every true teacher is a healthy one. And then there's the lover. You meet them in the poet who aches for beauty, the friend who connects deeply, the partner who sees you fully. The lover awakens intimacy, tenderness, and devotion. But when distorted, this archetype collapses into obsession, jealousy, or self-destruction. The same fire that warms can also burn. You can probably already see pieces of yourself in these examples. That's the point. Archetypes are not abstract theories. They are lived realities. They shape the stories of your relationships, your career, your crises, and your transformations. But here's what makes Jung's insight so radical. He didn't just say these patterns exist out there in myths and culture. He said they live inside you. And if you never learn to recognize them, you'll live them unconsciously. You'll think you're just being yourself. But really, you're reenacting the same story humanity has told for thousands of years. Every time you sacrifice your own needs to please others, you're in the caregiver's grip. Every time you chase one dream after another, unable to commit, you're caught in the explorer. Every time you insist on being the strong one, refusing to show weakness, the hero is carrying you, maybe even destroying you. The challenge, then, isn't to reject archetypes. It's to recognize them, to ask, which story am I living right now? And is it serving me or consuming me? Because the truth is this, archetypes don't disappear when ignored. They just move into shadow. And when they do, they control you from the dark. The lover becomes the addict. The hero becomes the tyrant. The caregiver becomes the manipulator. The magician becomes the fraud. This is why Jung insisted on consciousness. To become aware of the archetype at play is to take back your freedom. It's to say, I see you, I honor you, but I am not your puppet. That is where individuation begins. The slow, steady reclaiming of your own myth, instead of being swallowed by one that isn't yours. And here's the paradox. The more you recognize these figures, the more you realize they're not enemies. They are guides. They hold the keys to your growth. The hero pushes you to develop courage. The lover teaches you intimacy. The sage awakens wisdom. The shadow forces you to face your truth. Every archetype has a gift, if you can meet it without being consumed by it. That's the work Jung left us. To learn the dance, not the domination. To live with archetypes as companions, not dictators. If archetypes are the hidden stage directors of our lives, then individuation is the moment you step out of the script and into authorship. For Jung, individuation was not self-improvement, not success, not even happiness in the modern sense. It was becoming whole. That means recognizing that you are not just your persona, the mask you show the world. You are not just your ego, the voice in your head narrating your daily life. You are also the shadow you've denied, the lover you've neglected, the hero you've overplayed, the magician you've feared, the sage you've longed for. Every archetype has a place inside you. Individuation is the process of giving each one a seat at the table without letting any of them take the throne. This isn't about perfection. It's about integration. To meet the lover without drowning in obsession. To embrace the hero without being consumed by conquest. To welcome the caregiver without being trapped in martyrdom. To allow the magician without falling into manipulation. And most importantly, to confront the shadow, not as a monster, but as a teacher holding everything you've buried. Individuation doesn't happen in one grand awakening. It unfolds through small acts of honesty. Every time you admit a truth you've avoided. Every time you notice a projection and ask, what is this showing me about myself? Every time you stop blaming the outside world and recognize the archetype moving within you, you are individuating. It is a lifelong process. Jung said, no one ever completes it perfectly, but every step toward it makes you more real, more authentic, more alive. The energy you once wasted suppressing parts of yourself becomes available for creativity, for love, for purpose. You stop living as a fragment and begin living as a whole. And here's the paradox. The more whole you become, the more universal you feel. You stop seeing yourself as separate from the human story. You realize that the hero's struggle, the lover's longing, the caregiver's sacrifice, these aren't just your stories. They are our stories. You are living threads of a myth as old as time. And by owning your role, you bring consciousness to the entire human drama. This is why Jung believed individuation was not just personal therapy, but collective healing. A person who becomes whole doesn't just transform their own life. They ripple into the world, offering authenticity in a culture drowning in masks, offering depth in a society obsessed with surfaces. And maybe that is the ultimate invitation, to stop living as a puppet of unconscious archetypes and to begin walking as a conscious participant in the great unfolding of humanity. To no longer ask, which story is controlling me? But instead, which story am I choosing to live? Because in the end, the gift of Jung's work is not that he explained archetypes. It's that he gave us a map to navigate them, a way to live mythically without being consumed by myth. A way to become not just a character in a story, but the author of one. So ask yourself, which archetype is most alive in you right now? Which one has been ignored, buried, or feared? Which one is calling to be integrated? That is where your path of individuation begins. And if you choose to walk it, slowly, courageously, honestly, you won't just understand archetypes. You'll live them. You'll integrate them. You'll transcend them. And in doing so, you may discover what Jung considered the rarest thing in the world, a human being who is whole.